10. Fortuna, TK, Fortune. Domina Casus, Lady of Chance. Suit, Pentacles, element Earth, direction northeast. Motto, Fortuna roto volvitur, the wheel of fortune turns. Deities, TK, Fortuna. Dice, 2 plus 5 equals 2, virtue, plus 4, order, water hexactis. 4 plus 4 equals 4, virtue, plus 4, order, fire hexactis. Astragali, 1 plus 6 equals 1, personal triumph, plus 6, virtue, plus 4, order. Greek letter, kappa. Kyklos, wheel, kairos, opportunity, circumstances, success, critical time, place, etc. Kybernetes, steersman. Description, Fortuna stands at the centre of her wheel, observing the rotation of 4 figures on its rim. Above her, below her, to her left, and to her right. The figure to Fortuna's right is a blonde boy with short ass ears. He is dressed neatly in green and white, emblazoned with the alchemical symbol for Mercury. The figure sitting on top is a mature man with tawny hair and long ass ears. He is dressed regally in blue and gold, emblazoned with the alchemical symbol for sulphur. The figure to her left is an upside-down, older, sunburned man with dark brown hair and an ass tail. He is dressed in tattered brown and green and dark red clothes, with the alchemical symbol for salt. The figure underneath the wheel is an ancient, white-bearded, swarthy man, similar to Trump 11, old man, crawling to Fortuna's right on all fours and dressed in black and brown rags, marked with the alchemical symbol of the Capus Matuum, 2 dots over 1 dot, all in a circle. Each of the figures is labelled with a scroll. The one to Fortuna's right has, in altrum toller, I am raised on high. The top has Nemus exaltus, exalted too much. The left has descendo minoratus, I descend diminished. And the bottom has funditus mortificatus, utterly destroyed. Fortuna holds the cornucopia in her left arm and a ship's rudder in her right hand. She wears a robe of varying hue and the mural crown, from which a veil hangs over her ears and the back of her neck, leaving her face in shadows. The wheel has 8 spokes, alternating thick and thin. Verse. The wheel of fortune turns, while one declines, another is upraised, but she assigns the fate who holds the hidden axle pin, the sacred source where destinies begin. Ensure each turn of life the soul refines. Interpretation. The wheel represents the inexorable rise and fall of fortune. In her right hand, Fortuna holds the tiller by which she steers the course of events, and in her left she holds the cornucopia, the fruits of respecting her laws. At Fortuna's right, a young and nimble youth ascends with the wheel. His rising station and power sow the seeds of his inevitable decline, but his sprouting ass ears show that he cannot see beyond his imminent triumph. His power reaches its maturity, and he is king of all he surveys. Yet this very power leads to rigidity, which will topple him with the wheel's revolution. Still the ass, he cannot give up his rigidity, although his power falls precipitously. Only when his fortune bottoms out does he begin to loosen up and regain the flexibility that will allow another, hopefully wiser ascent. So it is with kings and corporations, societies and schools, fortunes and philosophies. The alchemist knows Fortuna's law and can use it beneficially, harnessing the descent as a means of disintegration to achieve a higher integration. Then the rotation of the elements becomes an ascending spiral. He also knows that although the wheel's rim always moves, hidden behind Fortuna's captivating form is the stationary axis, the unmoving hub, the fixed point, immune to changing fortune. This is where he stations himself. when he has had enough of riding Fortune's wheel. Commentary. 10. Fortune has no corresponding trigram because she is the Lady of Chance. The yin force opposite 1, the Magician, the Lord of Chance. The yang force, together they govern the first octawad, the personal triumphs, comprising triumphs 2 to 9. 10. Fortune separates the personal triumphs, which represent the descent of spirit into matter, manifesting as success in the world, from the universal triumphs, trumps 11 to 20, representing the reascent of the spirit from matter, manifesting as a turn inward and as spiritual accomplishments, figure 3. The wheel is the turning point from involution and generation to evolution and regeneration. It is significant that Fortune is trump 10, for the Pythagoreans say that the decad is a higher order unity, since the decad circles back on itself and encompasses all the elementary numbers. This is symbolised by Greek and Roman numerals, since the Greek numeral for 10 is I, which is also the Roman numeral for 1. The Pythagoreans also call the decad fate and the all-fulfiller, since it brings all things to their natural ends. It represents the wheel, for it comprises the monad and the ennead, which are the hub and the rim. Indeed, it is the outermost rim of the heavens, which turns all the inner spheres. 10. Fortune heralds a new epoch of integration. On the other hand, the numerical value of TK Ethea, the goddess TK, Fortune, is 1331, which reduces to 11 plus 1 minus 3 plus 3 minus 1 equals 11, the final number of the hendecad. Thus the wheel has both the perfection of the decad, Greek iota, but the excess of the hendecad, which marks the first step, Roman 1, or I, beyond that perfection to another level, for the wheel separates the personal triumphs 1 to 9 from the universal triumphs 11 to 20. According to René Guénon, the hendecad represents the hieros gamos, sacred marriage, with both joins the bodies 2 plus 3 and unites the souls 2 times 3 of the female 2 and male 3. For convenience, I have translated Dominus and Domina Casus as Lord and Lady of Chance. However, the literal meaning of Casus is anything that befalls, from cedo to fall, an accident, an opportunity, an event, an occurrence, an occasion, etc. Thus, a chance should be thought of as an opportunity rather than an uncaused event. Therefore, instead of calling them the Lord and Lady of Chance, it would be better if the Dominus Casus, Hermes the Magician, were called the Lord of Opportunity, and if the Domina Casus, Fortuna, were called the Lady of Destiny. Indeed, from at least the 4th century BCE, the Greeks distinguished TK, fortune, from automaton, chance. TK especially represents the success and good fortune that is a consequence of skill as well as luck. We are reminded of Pasteur, who said, "Le hasard ne favorise que l'esprit préparé." Luck favours only the prepared mind. This is the reason that although Fortuna is sometimes shown blindfolded, as in the Visconti Sforza tarot deck, she is not in our image, for she consciously guides the turning of the wheel, which she holds in some images. Her guidance is also shown by her right hand on the rudder, which is a symbol of guidance, control, safety and fate. She is noble, wise, gracious and all-powerful. Menander called her a divine breath or understanding that guides and preserves all things. In addition to the goddess, the Greeks and Romans thought that each individual had their own TK or Fortuna, a daemon steering their destiny. The individual Fortuna is the hidden self, which unconsciously chooses the turnings of fates. This is the central core, the hub of the wheel, which is hidden. Each city also had a Fortuna, which is why she wears the mural crown. The variability of fortune is described well in the Carmina Burana. This is the last verse of Carmen 2. Fortune rota volvitur descendo mineratus, alta in altum talitur, nimis exaltus, rex sedet invertis, caveat ruinam, nam sub axe legimus, hercubam reginam. That is, the wheel of fortune turns, diminished I descend, another is lifted and raised too high. A king sits at the summit, because beware thy ruin, for under the axle we read that Hecuba was queen. Nimis exaltus, exalted too much, recalls the motto of temperance. Non quid nimis, nothing too much. In Carmen 1, Fortuna is described as obumbrata et velata, obscure and veiled. Her robe of varying hue represents variability. The Carmina Burana describes her as statu variabilis, in a state of changing, we might say constant in changing. The wheel has a rich meaning, much of which centres on or revolves around the contrast between the rotating rim and the stationary axis. In a broad sense, the axis is being and the rim is becoming, the archetypal, eternal, and ideal, as contrasted with the specific, ephemeral, and real. However, the rim manifests a specifically cyclic becoming that is governed by Fortuna, with simultaneous coming to be and passing away, and more generally, the unity underlying all opposites. Of course, a wheel may rotate on a fixed axis and go nowhere, but we also know that a wheel may progress as it turns and thereby move the very axis of its rotation. Thus we are not condemned to the eternal reliving of our history, but can harness the inevitable rotation to our benefit. The substance in the alchemist Keratakis, c. 11 Old Man, also circulates, rising as vapour or spirit and falling again as fluid. But the alchemist has ensured that with each circulation it is further purified and ennobled. So too, if we remember the history of the wheel's previous rotations, we will not be condemned to repetition, but may progress with the axis, a spiral process of evolution, literally rolling out. The hub of the wheel represents the unchanging source of the phenomena confronting us. In psychological terms, it is the self, the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious, which is usually hidden as the hub is behind Fortuna. We are so captivated by Lady Luck that we forget to look past her. The hub makes the moving rim possible and demonstrates that although we seem to be met continually changing fortunes, this is a projection, and it is in fact our conscious ego revolving around ourself that turns to meet our fortune. However, that does not mean we can control the wheel, for free will resides in the conscious ego, which must ride on the rim, which is turned by hidden fate, Fortuna. We cannot stop the wheel and still live, but if we can find the central axis, then the rotation can become a spiral until we can progress. With the help of Fortuna, who holds the wheel, we can then fulfill our destiny. As I've said above, the classical conception of Fortuna is not blind. The rudder shows the steers with foresight. Promethea, her mother, according to Alcman. Those who respect her and the other gods are rewarded from her cornucopia, the fruits of striving towards the central axis. for those who disregard her laws, especially for those who have the hubris to try to escape the wheel and rise above fate, by which even the gods are bound. The wheel becomes the instrument of torture. Like Ixion, who had the hubris to try to seduce Hera, they are bound to the wheel and are broken by it. According to an old Latin proverb, Fata volentes docent nolentes trahunt, fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. In its broad sense, a pentacle is any circular object inscribed with magical symbols. So in the tarot, we can take a pentacle to be any mandala-like device which symbolises completeness. Recall also that the suit of pentacles is sometimes called discs. Thus, the Wheel of Fortune is certainly a pentacle, which is a suit associated with 10, fortune. The rest of the tetrad of transformation has suits 1, magician equals wand, 11, old man equals sword, and 16, star equals cup. In general terms, a wheel symbolises time, fate, and the wheel of life, the eternal cycle of degeneration and regeneration. In Gregor Reich's Margarita Philosophical 1503, the wheel is labelled ad alta veho, I'm lifted on high. Gloria elatos, lifted up, I am proud. Descenda mortificatos, mortified, I descend. Axi roto, I am turned by the wheel. The Visconti Sforza tarot deck and a 13th century manuscript of the Carmina Burana in Munich both show the wheel labelled Regnabo, I shall reign. Regno, I reign. Regnavi, I have reigned. Sum sine regno, I am without reign. This is also given in a medieval epigram. Cursus fortuna variata in more lune, crescit, decrescit, et iodum sistera nescit, elevo in primis regno toe uto in inimis, alfero ecce nimis, raro distant ultima primis, regnabo regno regnavi sum sine regno. That is, the course of fortune changes like the moon. It grows and shrinks and knows not how to stay the same. At first I'm raised and I enjoy the rain at last. Behold, I take too much. The ends differ seldom from stars. I shall reign, I reign. I have reigned, I have no reign. According to Moakley, Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy was the source of the medieval conception of Fortuna, which she compares to the Buddhist wheel of life and death. In Dante's time, Fortuna's 8-spoked wheel was said to represent 8 states of life. Umilta, humility, pazienza, patience, pace, peace, ricchezza, wealth, superbia, pride, impazienza, impatience, guerra, war, and povertà, poverty, with opposites placed on the diameters. The 4 figures represent the 4 principles and 4 stations of all processes of cyclic rise and fall. As paradigms, we may take spring, summer, autumn, winter, and youth, maturity, old age, death, 21 years each. The real and fanciful beasts around the wheel in some tarot decks are a result of card makers misunderstanding the symbolism of the ass ears and tail. The figure on Fortuna's right represents humiditas, moisture, the power or principle of fluidity, corresponding to alchemical Mercury and the vernal equinox. This is the quality of flexibility and nimbleness, which facilitates growth and the expansion of energy and power. It is the moist, sappy growth of spring and the waxing vigour of supple youth. Thus the figure on Fortuna's right ascends from the cool at the bottom of the wheel to the warm at the top. The figure at the top of the wheel represents Calidus, warmth, the principle of energy or power, corresponding to alchemical sulphur and the summer solstice. Thus the top of the wheel represents the hot, flourishing strength of summer and full maturity. As the figure crosses the top of the wheel, this expansive, forceful power has a drying effect, shifting the balance from moist to dry, that is, from flexibility on Fortuna's right to rigidity on Fortuna's left. The figure at Fortuna's left represents Sikos, dryness, the power and principle of rigidity and inflexibility, corresponding to alchemical salt and the autumnal equinox. The side of the wheel on Fortuna's left represents the drying decline of autumn and the waning strength of old age. Dryness and rigidity inhibit life, and so the figure on Fortuna's left descends from the hot, burgeoning life at the top of the wheel to the cold death at the bottom. The figure at the bottom of the wheel symbolises Frigidus, cool, which represents the lack of power or energy and the winter solstice. The bottom of the wheel corresponds to the cold, inactivity and death of winter and the darkness of senility and death. Since rigidity cannot be maintained without energy or power, the figure below the wheel crawls to Fortuna's right, from rigidity to flexibility. In psychological terms, the descent to the low point is humiliating and mortifying, which dissolves the rigid structures, permitting them to become more fluid and flexible. Humility derives from Latin humus, grounded, earth. It comes from the same Indo-European root word as human and humble. There is no alchemical principle or spirit corresponding to the bottom of the wheel, for it is characterised by the absence of all spirit and quality. Thus I've associated it with a caput mortuum, deadhead, as will be explained shortly. The three upper figures corresponding to the alchemical principles of mercury, sulphur and salt constitute a traditional three-headed representation of time, also familiar as the maiden, mother and crone. The four quadrants of the wheel represent alchemical processes, which we will consider in the usual order. Fortuna's lower left, lower right, upper right and upper left, though in fact they form a cycle. The quadrant of the wheel at Fortuna's lower left represents the alchemical nigredo, blackening, in which the rigid structures are broken down, dissolved and allowed to putrefy. The resulting prima materia has no properties. It is neither moist nor dry, neither flexible or rigid, and has no inherent energy. In alchemy, it is called the capus mortuum, deadhead, the capus Osiridus, head of Osiris, and the Moors or Ethiopian's head, for it is the head of Black Osiris. It is also called Sol Niger, black sun, Corvus, cross or raven, and Caput Corvi, crow or raven's head. Its symbol is a simplified face, 3 dots in a circle, sometimes with a nose squiggle, as we see, for example, in the last will and testament of Basil Valentine. The outcome of the nigreda, the blackening, is black because it is devoid of all qualities. There is no heat or light, no illumination, and the resulting darkness utterly obscures all features. Thus, it represents a suitably neutral starting point for the alchemical process. The original prima materia The blackening corresponds to the quadrant of the wheel at Fortuna's lower left, which is dry and cool, that is, earthy, since the element earth is symbolised by the colour brown. The figure at the bottom of the wheel is dressed as in brown as well as black. The figure at the bottom of the wheel has a white beard because he represents the beginning of the next alchemical stage, the albedo, whitening, which transmutes the prima materia into silver. The albedo is accomplished by means of alchemical mercury, the spirit of fluidity. When the process is complete, we have reached the figure to Fortuna's right, which represents an increase in energy from the depths of the bottom of the wheel and the maximum of fluidity. Since this station represents the maximum of flexibility, it is considered white, for it can be tinctured with any colour. Fortuna's lower right quadrant is moist and cool, which is the element water associated with green. Therefore, the youth governing the albedo is dressed in green and white, which are also appropriate colours for spring when the snow yields to new growth. The boy at Fortuna's right has blonde hair because he represents the beginning of the next alchemical stage, the citrinitas, yellowing, which transmutes the silver into gold. The citrinitas is accomplished by means of alchemical sulphur, the spirit of heat. When the process is complete, we have reached the figure at the top of the wheel, characterised by the maximum of energy, represented by the golden yellow colour, but a loss of flexibility and growing rigidity, represented by a loss of whiteness. Fortuna's upper right quadrant is moist and warm, which is the element air, associated with blue, copper, eoxide. Therefore, the king governing the citrinitas is dressed in blue and gold, which are also appropriate colours for summer, characterised by a bright sun blazing in blue skies. The king's hair is tawny or reddish brown because he represents the next alchemical stage. For some alchemists came to believe that gold, long thought to be the most noble metal, could be improved by a process called the rubedo, reddening, the result of which would be the losis, the violet, the peacock's tail, the rainbow, a kind of supercharged gold that could tincture other materials because it had more of the spirit of gold than its material could hold. To me, the lesson of the wheel is that rubedo is just a sort of hubris, striving too far, that Fortuna is inclined to punish. When the king who is already at the top tries to go farther, the only way to go is down. Therefore, I've called the fourth quadrant of the wheel adustio, which means a burning. For adustus means charred, scorched and burned, especially sunburned, and was commonly applied to the complexion. Thus, rather than the glorious iridescence of the peacock's tail, the outcome of alchemical hubris is the swarthy, dark brown of skin dried and burned by too much sun, a harbinger, as we know, of black, cancerous skin. Fortuna's upper left quadrant is dry and warm, which is the element of fire, associated with red and orange. Therefore, the man suffering the adustio is dressed in reds and browns, which are also appropriate colours for autumn, characterised by gloriously coloured leaves, which are nevertheless too dry and are destined to fall. The adustio is caused by the alchemical salt, the spirit of dryness or solidity, which draws out the moisture. His hair is black because he represents the beginning of the next alchemical stage in the cycle, the nigredo with which we begin. It will be apparent that the wheel also represents the rotation of the elements, earth to water to air to fire and back again. The entire rotation is governed by two laws. One, the rate of increase of power varies directly with flexibility, and two, the rate of increase of rigidity varies directly with power. Of course, rigidity is the opposite of flexibility. In the Visconti Sforza card, the ascending figure on Fortuna's right is dressed in green with white trim. The figure on top dressed in blue and gold with the emblem of the sun. The figure descending on Fortuna's left is dressed in red with the yellow trim. The figure at the bottom is in white rags. The Pythagorean Tarot's use of the green, white, blue, gold, brown, red, black, white colour scheme was independent of that in the Visconti Sforza deck, an indication of its archetypal validity. Crowley and Case similarly associate the three upper stations of the wheel with the three alchemical principles and with the three gunas of Hindu philosophy. Crowley has a clockwise rotation, as I do, so Mercury is on our left, Fortuna's right, Sulphur on the top, and Salt on the right. Mercury is associated with a guna called Sattva, which Case and Crowley explain as consciousness, intelligence, and balance. It corresponds to Jung's thinking function. Sulphur is associated with Rajas, representing passion, activity, restlessness, and brilliance. It corresponds to Jung's feeling function. Salt is associated with Tamas, representing stability, inertia, and ignorance, which might be identified with Jung's sensation. Case's wheel differs from ours in several respects. It rotates counterclockwise, with Sulphur on the ascending right side, Mercury on top, and Salt on the descending side. As in our wheel, Case has a fourth principle at the bottom, represented by the alchemical symbol for solutio, like the sign for Aquarius, which symbolises dissolution. We may compare it to the wheel resting in the water of the Worth deck. This corresponds to the caput mortuum and intuition, the fourth of Jung's functions. Crowley observes that Mercury, Salt, and Sulphur correspond to the magician, empress, and emperor, which are trumps 1, 2, and 3 in our sequence. 4, High Priestess, naturally corresponds to the fourth principle, since she is dark and dissolves everything in her waters. For the 8-spoke wheel representing the alchemical work, and for the elemental colours red, yellow, green, and blue, see Jung, P&A 163-9. Fortuna's full name is Force Fortuna, and in the earliest times she was called simply Force, chance or hazard. This may suggest unpredictable disaster, but ancient etymologists derived her name from ferre, to bear, bring, and said her name means the bearer, for she brings abundance and fertility, especially to women, and is often shown with many children around her feet. The cornucopia, horn of plenty, is a symbol of Fortuna's gift of fertility and abundance, for it is the horn of the great Amalthea, who nursed Zethus, when he was reared secretly in Crete. The horn symbolises the fertility of male united with female, for it is phallic in shape, yet it is hollow like the receptive female. Fortuna's kindness was known to the Greeks, who called her Saviour Tyche, daughter of Zeus the deliverer. For some say that she is the firstborn daughter of Zeus, Fortuna ios filia primogenia. Others say that she is the daughter of Forethought, Promethea, and the sister of order and persuasion, which shows she is not so capricious as usually assumed. She is described as follows in Sophocles' Antigone. For Tyche, with a constant ebb and flow, casts down and raises both the high and low.